Before I begin, I want to thank Torah for honoring us and hosting this event. As well as I want to make a mention and thank Mr. Jesse Salem for his tireless work, day in, day out. I remember when he would talk to me about this idea, and many people have great ideas, but Jesse, you made this idea a reality. You have created and sponsored, probably for the last 50 to 60 years since our community has been on these shores, the greatest, most widespread learning and completion of Tanakh in our community's history. Jesse, Hazak u'Baruch. As Jesse mentioned, Limud Tanakh in our community is heritage. In the old country in Halab was something that really was automatic. Let's call it a no-brainer. I remember many, many years ago, one Tisha B'Av, breaking my teeth on the book of Iyov, sitting back and reading it aloud, and a few seats away from me, an elderly gentleman of the community from Halab, who really wouldn't call him a scholar, but a certainly well-learned man, as I'm reading it, continues to read Prakim by heart of Iyov. And I asked him, when was the last time you read Iyov? He says, last time I read Iyov was maybe 30 years ago. And you still know it by heart? He said, we learned it. So, we are seeking here nothing new. The limud of Tanakh that we are looking at and trying to fulfill and trying to propagate is not a new thing. It goes way back to the roots and the core of who we are. And the most we can do, and the most we could attempt to accomplish, is like a dog sipping from the ocean of our forefathers and our teachers of how they studied and were so proficient in Tanakh. I'm going to say a few words about a teacher in our community for many years who made part of his life mission teaching Tanakh in Brooklyn when it wasn't so popular. Rabbi Ezra Labaton, Alav Shalom, spent a life dedicated to teaching in our community. He worked tirelessly teaching the values that he believed were so dear, and the core and the source of those values he sought in the words of our Nevi'im. And before it was so popular, he had a Siyum Tanakh in his shul maybe 30 years ago. He taught Friday night lectures of Tanakh into the words of the Nevi'im, book after book, delving into its values and learning life lessons from the words of our Nevi'im. He believed that the Tanakh in its entirety, to study it was a goal accomplishable by every Jew. No matter which passages and how complex they were, he believed that it was possible for every Jew to study and learn the Tanakh. And when asked why and how, he simply would recall the days of his youth in Yeshivat Magen David, where his teachers in 7th and 8th grade would struggle to teach every student the Tanakh. He believed that came from our unique Sephardic experience, where the words of the Tanakh were the inspiration and the goal of scholar and layman alike. And we therefore, as we enter into the Siyum Tanakh, remember him and honor his memory with the Siyum of an individual who spent his life teaching in our community. Teheh nishmatot tzura b'tzura hayim. Amen. I will now discuss a few points on the last book that we learned and taught, the book of Nehemiah. And I'll just make mention why Nehemiah was the last one. Because Jesse insisted that we follow the order of the Keter Arab Soba, and Divrei HaYamim was actually the first book of Ketubim, and Nehemiah would be the last. So, if many of you are wondering why we're going to finish with Nehemiah, that should be that would hopefully answer some of your perplexed looks. I'd like to make a few points on chapter 2 in Sefer Nehemiah. Nehemiah, just to sum up, receives very bad news. And the bad news is that things aren't looking good in Yerushalayim. The wall is destroyed. The situation on multiple levels is very difficult. And Nehemiah's face is noticeably depressed. And the king asked him, "What's wrong? Madua panecha ra'im ve'ata einecha holeh?" And he accuses him. And Nehemiah is in danger. And he literally accuses him that maybe he'd be plotting against the king. And Nehemiah explains to him the situation, explains to him, blesses the king, and explains to him the difficulty of his people. And eventually gets permission with an entourage to go to Yerushalayim. But what's interesting is, and I'd like to make a little comparison here, and those who studied with our classes know that we enjoy very much to see inter-Tanakh comparisons. And I'd like to do the same here for a minute. And the king asks, "Vayomer lamelech, al ma ze ata mevakesh?" Nehemiah, what would you ask? What do you want? Sound familiar? Anyone remember that question? From a king to somebody else? Anybody? Esther. Good. Va'omar lamelech, im al hamelech tov, v'im yitav avdecha lefanecha asher tishlacheni el Yehuda. Does that answer sound familiar? Im al hamelech tov. Right, so it's clear here that Nehemiah at some point has a certain pattern. And the pattern is Esther. Esther who stands in front of another Persian king. Esther who had to actually put her life in danger, as Nehemiah, make no mistake about it, as Nehemiah's life is in danger. And intercede on behalf of their people. They both fast and pray before approaching the king. They both wait. Nehemiah's waiting time is a bit longer than Esther's. The word Amelech in about 9 psukim is mentioned, I counted about 12 times. Hamelech, Hamelech, Hamelech. And they both have serious enemies that would like to see them dead and their people destroyed. And instead we know it's Haman. In the book of Nehemiah, it's a fellow named, a little less known, Sanballat and Tobiah Ammoni. The enemies of our Jewish people. And if we go to chapter 11, we find that there's something else unique that compares them. How does Nehemiah decide which Jews will live in Yerushalayim? And only 10% can. In a funny way. Nehemiah does. Well, if we're comparing to Esther, how do you think he's going to decide? Anyone want to take a guess? I don't know if I heard it. A goral, a lottery. Now, this is not the only time a lottery is mentioned in Tanakh. But the comparison is unique because it doesn't claim to be divinely orchestrated. And so, Nehemiah seems to be patterning himself after his predecessors. Nehemiah is standing as a member of the court, as a person who has the ability to intercede on behalf of his people. And as Jewish history tells us, members of the court had a very, very delicate balance. And Nehemiah sees his job as those before him. Yes, he will innovate. Yes, he will do new things. Yes, he will make takanot. But not as an innovator. He viewed the source and the power of his continuation as rooted in the tradition and the history of his people, as his mentors before him. Nehemiah, much more than Ezra, in his tefillot consistently quotes biblical personalities and quotes passages of earlier works. This was Nehemiah. Nehemiah also viewed his job as a Jewish leader, and there's interesting parallels, of this we won't go into as much, between him and the great Navi Yirmiyah. They both innovate Shabbat, and they both seek out from God protection from their enemies. They view themselves as part of a movement in Jewish history. I mentioned that there's a comparison between Nehemiah and Esther. However, I want to point out one key difference. Nehemiah in his prayers views and mentions, unlike Esther, explicitly the name of God. And I think that's done on purpose, because Nehemiah understood one key difference between him and Esther. His plan was to save not a large community of diaspora Jewry, but to save and plant the seeds of the Jews in Eretz Israel. And therefore, whereas Esther, God's name must be hidden, in Nehemiah, God's name must be declared. Because the life in Eretz Israel is not a nes nistad, but a nes galui, an open miracle for generations to come. And as Jesse mentioned, we were privileged to understand this more than any other generation. Because in our generation, we witness these nisim glulim as part of the Jewish existence. I will now make mention some of the last few psukim in Sefer Nehemiah. I will discuss the last three. And here Nehemiah prays to God. And he first prays to God about the Kohanim that are the Kohanim that were not supportive of his agenda, and that were unclean, and that polluted their lineage. And he talks about the children of a certain Yoyada ben Eliashiv, a Kohen Gadol, who becomes a Hatan, a son-in-law to Sanballat himself. Sanballat Horani, فَأَفْرِحَيْهُ مِعَلَيْهِ. I sent him away. And he's asking to remember them. And then he asks God, in a very unique last two psukim, to remember him. And God remember, and he asks us to remember all of his works. Now this is important because for Zechariah to remember is not so simple. Because although we will end our Tanakh learning with the book of Zechariah, he is not the last word chronologically. And we leave the book of Nehemiah, it's still open. Things aren't completed yet in Yerushalayim and Eretz Israel. And a job incomplete is very often a job. Those who do a function but don't complete it are often forgotten. And Nehemiah asked God, "V'tiharti mikol nechad, v'amida mishmerot l'kohanim v'leviyim ish b'mlachto." I cleanse the Mizbeach from all unclean and foreign people. I created and I established watchings for the Kohanim and the Leviim, each according to his appropriate jobs. U'korban etzim be'itim mizumanot. Korban etzim be'itim mizumanot. V'labikurim. He pointed specific times for the korbanot and set times for the bikurim. And he looks to God and he says, God, Zochrali Elohim v'tovah. Remember, this is the end of the book. Remember this to be God for good. So concerned how he might be remembered or forgotten. Now, Hazal, there's an opinion in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, said the Gimal, that are critical of Nehemiah for this last statement. The question, what does that mean? You need to be remembered? And they accuse him of some level of hubris. I think if we could understand Nehemiah and maybe that criticism, maybe the critique was that Nehemiah, maybe they accused Nehemiah of maybe going a bit too far in viewing himself in the image of his predecessors. Comparing himself so much to Esther and Yirmiyah, maybe they felt he went too far. And that might be accused of hubris. But if he did, it's because he understood the tenuous line that a leader in a new generation, accomplishing new things, innovative things, that maybe he'd be viewed not l'tovah, but as somebody who went too far, who went out and actually created too many new things. So really what Nehemiah was trying to establish is, yes, he'll innovate. Yes, he moved forward into the future. But at every step of his movement, at everything that he did, he saw himself and viewed himself in the image of his predecessors and the previous leaders of the Jewish people. All that the leader did was to move forward in new situations in the footsteps of the giants that preceded him. I want to wish everyone and all of the Misayimim and all of those who learned any of Tanakh and all of the future Misayimim a Chazak u'Baruch for all your accomplishments. Shana Tova, Tizku l'Shinim Rabot, Tikatvu b'Sefer Hayim. Amen.